transactions. Hi everyone, this is Mark. And on behalf of IOSH Hong Kong branch, I would like to welcome all of you to this webinars. Before starting the webinars, I would like to share a few information for this webinar first. Today, the topic is UK update on construction design management regulation 2015. And then we appreciate we can invite Mr. John Lacey as this webinar speakers. John is IOSH Hong Kong honorary advisors, past IOSH president, and past chair of IOSH Construction Group. John was a member of the panel for overview guidance to the UK regulations. He also is an active member of IOSH since 1977. And he still works as an ambassador and trainer in the safety and health industry. And now I would like to pass the time to John to share his idea for these webinars. John, please.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you can hear me. If you put the thumbs up, that will be good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Oh, good.
Yes, yes.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark. You never know with these systems whether it's working. Can I just start by congratulating Andy for all it, secondly, to congratulate him for all the work he's done and the well-deserved award that he's received. And I know everybody in Hong Kong has appreciated the work he's done over the years and for the future years. So thank you, Andy. Just to start, I ought to say good evening to everybody. It's still halfway through the day in the UK, and it's quite a sunny day. But good evening to you all, and thank you for joining. I want to start with just going through the changes or non-changes of CDM, and to give you a good overview of what the regulations require. But towards the end, I really want to focus on things that have changed, and particularly safety and design. And we'll start. Technology is not working, but it is now. Right, well, yes, as I was saying, I wish to go through with you CDM, if you're not familiar with it, Construction Design and Management Regulations as applies to the UK. Many countries have started to adopt these regulations, and I wish to go through what the fundamental requirements were. The regulations really started way back as a requirement in the UK to improve the situation on construction, particularly with the relationship between principal contractors and subcontractors, where the incidents that occurred on site are mainly happening to subcontractors, where main contractors were basically saying it's not our problem. This document that came out way back in 1987 that I was involved with actually identified the problems, and it took until 1994 for it to be really recognised under the regulations. So the regulations are very straightforward. The document, if you wish to download it from the HSE website, is a document called L153, and that gives you not only the regulation, but it also gives guidance and explanation to the regulations. The fundamental reason behind it was that we're looking for good systems in relation to health and safety, and how we ensure systems are clear to all. This is nothing new, and particularly you'll be aware of now, the system we've got for our new standard of 45,001, which is fairly basic in its principles. It talks about planning any operation that we carry out, making sure it actually operates, and checking regularly that it is actually working. And then if we find there's a fault, then we act accordingly and go back to incorporating that into the plan. So when we look at CDM and how we ensure projects are managed correctly, it's very similar. So what we're talking about there is to ensure that project management is clear, that when we deal with construction, that we get ready for it, we forecast and plan what's going to happen and coordinate those activities accordingly. But the big line that we have to ensure is that we do actually communicate these issues constantly. So looking at the general construction process, what one would see is that at the beginning of a project, it's the client's view on what they're after. So we talk very much about the concept of the work and what we're looking towards. This would normally incorporate the bringing on the team of a form of primary design, and that normally is headed up by a lead designer. They will then go into perhaps more detail, and the design team would take it from there as working up the project, as I'd call it. Next line is obviously to see who's going to deal with it. That's the procurement stage where people go out to tender and bids would come in. But equally, that needs to be well communicated as the work progresses. And all of these link together. And then finally, we would get to the construction phase where you would appoint normally a principal contractor, and that would happen on any side of the project, whether it's building a house, a factory, or a condominium, or office block. So all of those would be part of what are called the opportunities to get it right. And when we're trying to get it right, we've got to look at the risks involved. So when we talk about design risk, that initial design ought to identify any hazards associated with the design. Now that could be even the fact of where the site is, where the project's proposed, and if it's a large project like the various bridge structures we've got linking Hong Kong with other areas, that could be quite vast. But all of those hazards need to be identified very early on. Then we start looking at whether we can eliminate any of those issues. Can they be eliminated or bypassed? And if we can we, if we can't eliminate them, can we reduce the risk of them? The other thing is, if we eliminate some of the hazards, has it created a greater risk? So we need to double check that those things are being looked at. Once we've identified the situation, we may find that we have to redesign it, look at something completely different. But when we've come up with our final design, we need to consider, is it safe to build? Is it going to be safe to maintain, e.g. cleaning? And make sure others know about those issues all the way through the process. So we communicate that in various ways. Could be on the design drawings themselves. The whole concept needs to be well communicated as regards any residual risk. Now, when we look at risk, someone needs to mute their mic. When we look at those issues, we need to look at the elements of risk. Hopefully you can still hear me. Over the person, are they muted? Good. So my view on risk is that you need to look at its relevance and severity, what I call a severity outcome. Would the risk affect an individual? Could it affect more than one person if it remains? Would it be an ongoing situation where that will last for the lifetime of the structure? Equally, if it goes wrong, could it be catastrophic? And in that situation, we're talking very large numbers as regards looking at the design, if the design should fail or the system should fail. So hopefully you're keeping up with me with the slides. I know it's a slower turnover. What I would ask is just for you to consider for 2 minutes what you would see the highest risks associated with construction activities. Just if you're involved in that, please let us know. Make a note. What do you consider are the high risks associated with construction? Okay, I'll give you a couple of moments on that just for the slide to catch up, if you like. I'm asking you, everybody here, all 22 of you, if not more, what do you see the highest risks are? I don't think I'm going to get the answers instantly, but I can have a look on chats and see just for a minute. Nothing's coming up. Oh, there we go. Collapse. Yeah, very good. I like all this. Environmental risk. Yeah. The work itself. Yeah. Falls from height. Excellent. Yeah, there's lots coming up on the chat line. People themselves. Yeah. Lack of cooperation. Well, we're talking about that. Yeah, excellent. Lifting, yeah, a couple of cranes in there. So yeah, slinging, lifting safety, falling objects, excellent. Okay, I think we could spend the morning or the evening just talking about this. I'll stop it there, but you've got the gist. Well, I'll tell you what they are in my book. Definitely the sort of strategic issues as regards construction. The top of the list is definitely work at height. It is still the major hazard as regards people being killed or seriously injured. Round power or other services, people striking services, other issues that could cause problems in that respect. The stability of the structures, whether it's in a temporary or complete condition. So they're things that need to be looked at. Plant, transport, interaction between machines and people. Again, that would be, I would take in the use of craneage and other issues as regards that. And work in the ground. So quite a broad spectrum as regards those issues. One that we don't often talk about, and we should, because it is, in my book, the biggest worry, is the business of ill health in construction. And those who I've spoken to before and met before will know that that is a big issue for myself as regards ill health. You don't get many old construction workers. Most fade away or can't do the job. So we need to look at that. And when I talk to architects, the sort of diseases that need to be looked at are are as follows. Occupational cancers through various causes, materials being used or being exposed to such materials. So substances that we use, various chemicals we use. Noise, vibration, deafness is not a thing that comes to mind instantly, because you know, you cannot see if someone is deaf. It's one of those issues that you know, people don't. It's not an obvious that people are deaf, and that deafness caused by work, and on vibration and manual handling, musculoskeletal issues. So if you look at this photograph, it's a simple photograph, and think of perhaps where the designer could have solved some problems as regards just the issue of dust. The photograph shows a manhole cover, a drain cover running along a footpath. What you'll see is there's lots of narrow offcuts that have had to be created. Each of those has been cut, most probably by a disc cutter, which creates dust. And all you safety people will realise that sand and cement create silica dust, which is a killer, silicosis. Now, the question you would ask is, why did the designer decide to have round manholes? Why did he decide to have those odd measurements put on the outside of the curb? And equally, for the life of that footpath, as soon as a heavy vehicle goes up that curve, those little sections will be broken. So poor design, but equally the business of health perhaps wasn't considered. I'm going to show you a short video. Hopefully it will work. If not, I'll soon move on with it. Let's just see if this works. I'm sorry, Louise. Let's just see if this works for us. All right, here we go. Okay, hopefully you got that. One of the things I would ask, if you managed to hear that, was there was the time given about designing it out in that little video was extremely short. The main comments were the control should be put onto the contractor. The contractor actually isn't the cause of the problem. It was whoever designed that he had to cut through the wall to chase out ready for services. So that's where I'm talking about designers preventing ill health. Okay. So what is CDM really about? And just to get back onto that, I think it's important. So CDM has got really what we call some major players that need to be looked at. And again, you can get this in the guidance note, not only by the HSE, but through the Construction Industry Training Board. When we looked at the regulations, we decided these were the ones that needed to be looked at. There's people called contractors, clients, of course. We've got principal designers, contractors, and workers and designers. All of these need to be looked at. And when we're looking at a project, we need to know who should do what under the regulations. But it's fairly straightforward. The major player, of course, is the client. And the client's got to ensure that procedures are in place to control risk. Now that's easily said, but if I'm a client that's building a hair salon, let's call it, or hairdressers, I'll know nothing about construction, so I need advice, I need help. So the next player would be whoever you go to create your design, and that's the principal designer. So the principal designer really should manage health and safety and liaise with others, and particularly with the client. So at the design phase, then very much the involvement should be with the client and others. And that would lead right the way through until we come to what I call the construction phase. So the designer is key. If that designer isn't aware of health and safety issues in relation to his design, then he's got to get some advice. And that's perhaps where yourselves come in, to support people in the industry who perhaps haven't thought of issues of design. And I'll go into that a bit later. At the construction phase, of course, you'll get what I call the principal contractor, and they will oversee the work, but will very much communicate and liaise with the client and designers. That's a must. So that's how it must operate. How we deal with that is by good cooperation and good coordination. So you will have design review meetings, progress meetings, how we get the message across to those coming onto site through our inductions, good briefings, regular briefings, morning meetings perhaps to discuss what's happening the next day. Are there any issues that need to be taken into account? What the feedback is from the job itself, any complaints that may occur that we need to look at, and regular monitoring. And that's generally where the health and safety professional will come in, by overseeing that everything is working as it should. So regularly monitoring the situation. As mentioned, the regulations have what I call three main players, main duty holders, and they are identified in the regulation. So they're a legal requirement. And I know in Hong Kong, and particularly I believe in Singapore, they have embedded these requirements into legislation. So the client has some duties, principal designers and principal contractors. Everybody does really, but what must be done? So the client at pre-design stage must make sure there's proper management systems in place. So making sure designers consider health and safety risk, both for construction and ongoing use and maintenance. The client should also check whether the people are competent to do it. If that designer's only ever built houses, is he really the right sort of person to build an office block. And how are we going to monitor performance on site? Is it working? And at the end of the day, what information is going to be given back to the users or the client as regards the health and safety ongoing issues regarding that building? So what the clients have to do is make sure this happens. But as we said, for what I call a naive client, such as hairdresser or whatever, if that was the firm that was having a building put up, then they should seek advice. And so there is no excuse for ignorance as regards that. But the designers, the first person they meet, should give them that advice. So that's very important indeed. And at the end of the day, is the job going to be handed over properly? So whatever size of work it is, follow. So one of the things the client must help with and should help with is what I call pre-construction information. So it gives information, again, needed by not only the designers, but also contractors that are going to work on it. So another question for you, what sort of information would be useful for the designer and or contractors if they were proposing to build, let's call it a multi-story office block in the middle of Kowloon? So what things would just need to be considered? And these are simple answers really we're looking for, nothing too complicated, but what would you need to know if there was a block of land in Kowloon ready for development? What information would be necessary as what I call pre-construction information or pre-design information, which would be useful for these people? Shall we go back to the questions and chat form on that, if that's okay? So what information would be useful for people who are going to start either the design process, or if it's gone beyond that, information for the contractors on how they're going to set about the build of this structure? Any ideas? I'll go back to the chat forum. How are we doing? Any ideas? What do we need to know? Hopefully you're still there. Ah, here we go. Yeah, we're getting some. Oil tank next to the site, possibly. Substances. Yeah, good. Previous use. Excellent. Yeah, that's good. Logistics. Yeah, how are we going to get the materials in and out? Underground facilities. Excellent. Great stuff. Okay, you've done well. That's good. Let's just see. I've got a few. Hopefully it's going to work. Something's not working here. Right, yeah, here we go. So pre-construction, and a lot of you have thought of this. So, you know, what's the program? What records and plans? Adjacent buildings, I think. Access, security. If it's already a building that's in use and you're doing some refurbishment, You know, what's the interface there? Someone mentioned vehicle movement, clients restrictions, structures that are there now. You mentioned about materials, asbestos, any plant overhead services. I know Hong Kong in general, you don't have many overhead services, but certainly do in the UK. We have major issues with overhead lines, contaminated land. And when we get to the design, you know, what must be the sequencing? So there's a lot there that needs to be put in what we call the pre-construction information pack. Which is useful. So let's look at this building. This is a quadrangle. It's surrounded on all four sides by the structure. So if we want to work on the interior of this, or perhaps we're going to build a structure within it to increase the floor space, then we would need quite a lot of information we've just covered as regards access, egress, materials, etc. So quite an interesting area. So the client wants to ensure that that information has been passed through and it will continue through the project. One of the requirements is of a client to actually appoint a designer, and that's in the regulations. So again, anyway, but they're to understand their duties, and I'm going to cover that a bit more. So principal designers could be various types of people, and there's some faces of people that we would instantly recognise as designers. So Mr. Musk there designing vehicles, but it would be the same if we're talking about structures. So it's a requirement for a principal designer to be appointed. The duties of a principal designer apply. Doesn't matter about the contract arrangement, but if there's other designers appointed, then that's fine. But there should be a head designer, and I'd call them perhaps the design manager, lead designer. But it's making sure that everybody is aware of their requirements. They're aware of what they're going to be building, designing, and they're aware of the risk associated. So quite important. The principal designer's role is to coordinate, look at design decisions and question them perhaps, make sure the client's kept up to speed, make sure the pre-construction information for all bodies are there right the way through the project. And at the end, make sure that there is a file or handover document completed. So that's very important. The business of interaction, well, we've already said about communication, so it's ongoing. Lots of arrows on that photograph, on that slide, but it just shows how much the communication, how important that is, that everybody is aware that's what's going in. So no excuses for lack of information. It really takes us back to what we said with 45,001, to be honest, because we're talking really of pre-checks, doing the job, checking again where required, and moving on. So designers, very important, and making sure things happen is relevant. Just going on a bit, the regulations, I don't like to keep looking at actual quotes from the regs, but what it identifies in the regulation is who is a designer, what the designer's work entails, and there's a whole lot in L153 there. The ERIC principle about elimination and replace, this is about the risk management and cooperating with others. So when we're talking those issues, when we talk about prevention, can we avoid any risks? Look at those that remain and ensure we've got proportionate measures to control those risks at source. Now, that's no different than what we do all the time anyway now, isn't it, with our risk assessment? So what we're saying is designers should embed that into their system. So some good design practice required, you know, how are we going to do it? So that's just giving you the balance of how we all look at risk and risk management. Okay. We want evidence of that. So for the whole team, as it progresses, you should have system of hazard reduction that we've used with other companies. The HSE give guidance on that as well. They call it a red amber list. So that can work, RAG list. And what they're saying with that is that if it's on the red list, we should not carry it out. Again, like you said, with it was asbestos, how we can eliminate that issue. Look at how we're going to manage others, and others might be actually encouraged. So how we deal with it. So as it goes through the design process, you'll be looking at checklists. So this is one for a firm called Severfield. They're mainly structural steel people that I've dealt with, and they will have a list as regards systems, who's doing what, and how that's being carried out. People talk about checklists not being good, but actually they're great aid to making sure things are done. And then as it goes through, we can check that we're on target and operations are working. So the system shouldn't be difficult, but it's having the systems in place to comply with the regulation and having evidence to show it's working. Okay. Sometimes people get it wrong, and here we've got a slide that identified, I'm sorry to say, the death of a worker. If you look at that photograph, that is 7 floors high. It is the access to an area of the plant room of the building. And again, what could have gone wrong there? Any thoughts as regards the chat? If you're catching up on that, let me know. Let's have another look at the chat room. What do you think may well have happened in this respect? We're off again. Good. Yeah, fall hazard. Brilliant. Yeah, definitely a fall risk, isn't it? Yeah, good. Good to see that. Yeah. Thanks, Charles, and thanks, Chan. That's fantastic. Yeah. Ah, he did too. Yeah. Well, what happened here? The person was coming down this ladder and missed a step and fell down there and was killed. Now the question there is, was that foreseeable? If someone's going to come up a vertical ladder or down a vertical ladder, is it foreseeable that they could fall? Now, in question, the architects were prosecuted, the designers were prosecuted. But if that ladder is in that position, without any protection, there is a chance, not only from the ladder, but even this edge is not a reasonable height. I hope you agree with me that this could be easily overcome. Yeah. The look from the ground was purely aesthetics. All right, they required air coming into that part of the plant room, but they could have put a mesh screen up and it would not have been seen from the ground. The other thing is, why did they put the steps so near to the edge? If going back to standards, if you're involved with construction, you follow standards as regards design, the base of the vertical ladder should have at least 1.2 meters between it and any edge. So this isn't even 500 mil. So the designers were prosecuted, and the shame is that someone was killed without that thought. I think even what is even more of a shame is anyone building this, the contractor and any tradespeople looking at that would say it is foreseeable that someone could fall and fall off of it. So very sad. So we need to consider design and the potential. I'd like you just to look at this next slide. Right. Now, is this a familiar photograph? When we're talking of condominiums, is it not foreseeable that when these buildings were designed, that they would require air conditioners? I think in Hong Kong, you need air conditioning just about everywhere. So whoever designed this building, and don't fret, I raised this with your development bureau a couple of years ago. So it was quite an interesting discussion. But whoever designed this building would know that it needed air conditioning. So AC units, yeah, they need to have vent to the outside. But why could you not have designed it so they were what I call inside the building structure, so they could be maintained without risk? And we've already identified the biggest risk is from. And I don't know if the lady who was in your branch is still in the branch, but she approached me some years ago and said that she worked for an air conditioning maintenance company, and she had just had one of her employees fall and die. Now, it's easy to say, oh, he hadn't harnessed on, he hadn't done this and that, but all of this was foreseeable and all of this could be designed out. So we've got a lot to do when we talk to designers to improve the situation. Okay. Going back to that photograph and the one before, when we talk about the principal contractor, the principal contractor is looking after all the operations and responsible for all the things that goes on site. But they really ought to raise questions on design where it's foreseeable that perhaps by a change of design, this could be prevented. So it is of concern. I'm going to move quickly on because I know I'm running out of time. Quickly go into some basic safety and design issues. Company I did some work for was Severfield, and they had the task of refurbishing Blackfriars Bridge in London. There were lots of hazards associated with working over water, particularly over the fact that this Blackfriars station had to remain open as much as possible, and the whole project required redesigning the bridge structure and covering it, as you can see on the photograph. So quite a worry as regards how it was dealt with. I'm just going to pick up on a couple of issues. One of the biggest issues you can see is that structure for the roof on the left. You can see they put a roof system over the whole of the bridge to make that part of the platform, extending platforms for the trains to run. How do we do that? We're over and we're working at height. Well, what happened? Work at height. We don't want people swinging about on steel, so they designed a system to have this structure built on the ground, and with some good design systems, they were able to lift it by crane into position. And there's one of the sections going in. It looks top heavy, but it isn't, because the triangular slings are fixed and it works, I can tell you. So they were able to apply all of those roof structures on site without people having to climb onto them. So this can be done by good design thought. So it's not just the end use, it's how do we build safely. Equally, using prefabricated systems helps. So where possible, lift a prefab in. It saves time for people working at height. The use of various mobile elevated work platforms, mutes, helps now. That one's got a hell of a reach on the right there. So you can see how they're working, but nobody is slinging themselves around on that structure. Some basic stuff. We put stairways in, and quite often the person has to take the slings off. So what they've done there, they put a temporary handrail on the ground so that the slinger can get up there and take the sling off without putting themselves at risk. So that, again, is a simple design which helps. Here's some stairs. Someone had the idea on site, so it's not even a case of, oh, it's got to be the higher ups in the organisation. The person said, well, when these steps are put in, they're a great idea, but when it's wet, they become slippery. So we put some grips on and highlight them for visibility. Simple systems can help an awful lot. This is a system put in by Severfield, where structure before it's lifted. So hopefully you can see that. So before it's slung, these are placed on. So when it's in position, you've got an instant edge protection for the operation. Here's some more where we've got a section where it's been built in sectional systems. So again, less problems as regards handling and making sure, obviously, that it fits. Now, I know Andy Lowe also is like me, he's been in construction forever. And one of the things that we're both strong on is what we call BIM. Build this with technology, such a wonderful system that now we can design and look at problems well before really we've gone to production. So proper planning, proper visualization will help, but you need the people with experience to look at it. So trying to bring the team together is important. So if you're looking at the team of designers, just ensure that they have done similar work before, that they are not too naive in this process. But equally, being naive and question, sometimes they're a good part of the team because they're obvious to them that can help. So visualization, yeah, great ideas will give us ideas of how we position as regards the site, how we access, how we use storage, what size of materials we can bring in. All of those things help. And taking it a stage further, we can see actually here the type, this was steelwork, what can be installed, what loading is going to be placed on those floors so we can build accordingly, and how that is going to operate. And we're going to put in systems where there are any clashes. Again, these BIM systems really assist us as regards in any clashes of services, of systems that could hold up the project and cause problems for future maintenance. So the whole new era of design, which is with us, will help to prevent harm, not only to the worker, but to the user. We can even visualize where we're going to place cranes, the arc of those cranes, the capacity, all of those issues can be taken into consideration as we work it. So from design to finished article, CDM can and will assist. Where it's been adopted, it works well. But just a word of warning, if you're as a client, you're dealing with others. If you're engaging people to carry out work, the same as if we're going to engage a safety practitioner, just make sure that we are aware of what is being agreed by those engaged on the project. A lot of people will employ others without really going into, well, what are you going to do for us? And one of the things that I've always asked clients to do is to ensure we've got that list of agreement before we sign an organisation on board. So if we talk of principal designers, we would ask what they are going to be doing. Okay, so that's just the start of a questionnaire, whether they're going to lead the activity, whether they're going to support it, whether it's applicable to what they're going to do, so where it's relevant. So if they're appointed to do it, we're making sure that they are going to do the job requested and we can measure it. So just a quick, I won't go in through this fully, but so again, who's going to do what, making sure people are competent is a stop there. Can they do the work? Who's going to coordinate it? Who's going to communicate? So simple checklists, again, will help. I think this is all going to be put on the system anyway, so it'd be for you to look at later. So CDM, yeah. It should follow a fairly straightforward route, but get a copy if you can download of that that 153 document, and I think you'll find it most useful. Just a more recent issue to discuss. You may well have heard of a situation where we had a major fire in the UK a while back now of Grenfell, and from that more legislation is in the pipeline. This is called the UK Building Safety Bill. we just need to know that it doesn't replace CDM. CDM is still live and kicking, but it was mainly about the Grenfell inquiry. The inquiry has come out with a number of failures. The main failure on design was the cladding of the structure. The cladding was found to be not totally fireproof, and when the fire took hold, it not only damaged interior, but it very swiftly ran up the whole of the outside of the structure because of the type of cladding that was installed. At the time, the cladding did comply with the British standard or European standard, but it was inadequate. So it's looking at high rise. And if we're talking to yourselves, you've got plenty of high rise. I would suggest that in Hong Kong, you use different cladding materials, but this is a major issue in the UK. So what it's saying is that very safety critical issues of any building, particularly with fire, need to be looked at early on. What material is going to be used and what is the fire protection strategy in that building? It also very much looks at the competence of people. The competence, as we've already talked about, principal designers and principal contractors carrying out the work. The competence of the supply chain, who's providing the materials. Are the materials suitable for this structure? So when we talk about that, it's are the people competent to be able to recognize the risks, the whole, and it is. So it's a very far-reaching piece of requirement. It doesn't replace CDM, because if CDM is followed, then it will work. So to me, the whole issue of health and safety, as you know, is that it is no surprise. We shouldn't have surprises. We've got our Christmas coming up soon, and I'm looking for some surprises, but I don't want a surprise in the realms of construction or safety. I just need to ensure that we get it right and we communicate accordingly. I hope I haven't gone over time. Hopefully it's been useful for you, and I'm ready for any questions. Thank you.
Yes, John. Someone shared their questions in the chat box.
Thank you. So we need to see some questions. Hello.
Hi, John. It's me from Andy.
Hello, Andy. I'll just see if I can see you.
Perhaps I can ask a question. Can you elaborate further about the duties of a domestic kind?
Of the domestic client. Now, as I say, in the time allowed, it is limited. In actual fact, domestic clients in the UK have no duties as such. The duties will be taken on by an architect or the builder.
I see.
Oh, hello, Andy. I can see you now. Good. Yeah. So as regards a domestic client, yeah, they've got no legal duty.
Okay.
But you would still have a duty of care. So if someone was going to build an extension onto your property, then I would expect the designer and or the contractor, and it would most probably be a small project, to ask some basic questions. You know, where do the drains run? Is there an electric cable coming into the property, water, all those services, like we said on the PCI, pre-construction information, should be asked by the contractor to the client, the domestic client. And again, that little slide that showed all the things you could question on the pre-construction can quite easily be transferred by a small builder onto that and make him a questionnaire. Have we asked the client this? Have we asked the client that? Now, if it's a major client, non-domestic, it is quite clear the client has a duty. Now, again, if that, as you know, where I live, we've got many farmers, and there, you know, a farmer wanted something built, he would know nothing about construction, but it would be a commercial issue. So the first thing that the architect should do is to clarify that it comes under CDM and say to the client, look, I will be your principal designer and I will ask those questions, you know, what's the ground like, what's the access, etc., etc. Yeah. So yeah, a domestic client has no legal duty, so the duties are taken over by those other duty holders. So they would be questioned if something went wrong. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, and congratulations.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thanks to everyone. Belongs to everyone, not me.
Good. Okay, thanks, Andy. Good to see you.
Good. Yeah.
This is Darren. Hi,
Hi,
John.
Darren. Yeah.
Yes. Hi. How are you? Okay. A quick question. Along the same line as Andy, if I have a big apartment or even industrial settings or factory or something like that, I want to build something more bigger than a domestic unit. Then I want to put in a lot of utilities or other services or other, even maybe a septic floor or a mezzanine, something like that into the building. So in that case, do I classify as a domestic client or will I be classified under this legislation to be responsible? This is my question, John. Hello, can you hear me? Hello, hello.
John, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, someone muted me.
That's fine.
Stop me from hearing.
Yeah. So, yeah, the first question I will ask is, who is paying for it? Okay.
Who is paying? Yes, yeah. I am the client. Of course, I have to pay for all these services.
Yeah. As a client, yeah, but it goes a bit beyond that, because you as a client paying for it, are you a business client? In other words, are you paying it via your business or are you paying it out of your own pocket? Does that make sense?
Yes, good.
Because
good,
if like Andy's question, if I'm a domestic client, I will be paying it either by a bank loan or something, but it is in theory out of my pocket. If I'm a commercial client, and what you've just described would be, I've got a building, I want to put a mezzanine in it, I want to do this, that, and the other, but who's paying for it? Oh, well, it's my company that's paying for it. Then immediately it is a commercial project.
Right.
And that client has legal duties then to ensure they follow what we've already said, giving it, only employing competent people, ensuring that there is sufficient information, etc. Now, as I said to Andy, if it's a farmer or someone who has nothing to do with the construction, hairdresser, whatever, in that situation, the first person who he meets or she meets should say to them, do you understand the law? No, I don't. Right. I can help you as the principal designer or as anybody, and I will ensure that these things are covered. But they need to prove their competence. Now, in the past, I've been asked personally to be a principal designer under these regulations. I've said, sorry, I can't. They said, well, you know all about safety. Well, I don't, but you know a lot about it. You know about the regulations. And I said, knowing about the regulations actually tells me that I can't be a principal designer because I am not a designer. Does that make sense?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I'm not a designer. Whatever you're building, I can look at and I can ask questions, but I am not a designer. So if I had to stand in a court of law and the judge said to me, Mr. Lacey, what do you know about the actual structural design of this building? I'd look a bit silly, wouldn't I? So in that fact, we need to say to clients, you know, bring on your designer, and that's how we help them. So, you know, we don't want to stop the project, but make sure the designer is asking the right questions and considering the risks associated with it. Like I say, with a mezzanine floor, you know, what's the structure like around it? Will it take the load of a mezzanine? If it won't, we've got to put reinforcing in. So you need a structural engineer. Does that make sense? So all of those things are about this communication through the system to prevent harm. Yeah.
So I come back a little bit complicated because the initial dividing line is whether you're paying out your own pocket or paying by the company, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But in some situation where a domestic unit can be owned by a company,
right?
Well, and a
yeah.
domestic unit can also, if it's big enough, I want to add another level of floor into it, then it will become a structural problem, a design issue, instead of just a purely domestic renovation or alteration.
That's right. So yeah, it's owned by others. I'm a developer. I own that condominium. I want to put another floor on top of it. Therefore, it's straight away. It is a commercial project because that business is paying for it.
Yes,
absolutely. Now, if it was my house and I wanted to put a room on in the roof because it's my house, then I'm a domestic client. But I hope someone would say to me, you can't just put another building on top because so you would be relying on the builder or the designer. Does that make sense? And they would do that. But that doesn't stop you as a domestic client saying, well, have you ever done one of these before? You would go through the normal system of checking whether the person was competent to do the build. So that would be part of it. But as soon, my easy answer for that is, who's paying for it? Is it out of my pocket or is it being paid for by a company? And as soon as they say it's a company, right, it's non-domestic, it is now a commercial project. And all the things we've talked about fall into line. Yeah.
Okay, simple question and simple answer. Thank you very much, John.
That's to be for me. Yeah. Good. Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.
Any others?
Okay, any other questions here?
Yes, Mark.
So maybe we can check a chat box. Mr. Lau have questions about the is it a written agreement with the principal designer is required so that the duty of the domestic client may be transferred?
Right, as we said, the domestic client as such has no legal duty, but what I would want to see if the designer was a proactive person, in other words, you know, they were really professional, I would ask that designer, like I did at the end of the project, to have a list of what that designer says he's going to do for you. Yeah. So tell me what you're going to do. And what I need to do for you. So that's how I would see it. The architect can't transfer the legal duties to the domestic client because it's not going to happen. Okay. But it needs to be clear from the client's perspective, and if it's a good designer or a good contractor, they would make it quite clear what we're going to do. I'll talk personally. I've got a super chap in my house at the moment doing some painting, right? And it's as simple as that. Before he started, we discussed what is he going to do, yeah, and he's priced accordingly, hopefully. So it's about a discussion, isn't it? What you're going to do for me, what am I going to do for you? You know, will I clear all the rooms or will he? And with a build, it will be the same, right? So,
Okay.
yeah, rather than just when I'm being serious, very much. If a project's going to be set up, we clearly want to know who's doing what, and let's discuss that before we press the go button, as I call it. And the best way of doing that is to write it down. This is what we're going to do. This is what you're going to do. Are you clear on that? Yeah.
Okay, thanks, John. Thanks for your sharing. Okay, maybe we go to the last questions. Anyone have questions here?
Okay.
Okay. If
Any
you
more?
know,
No more on the chat
anyone?
line? No. Okay. Well, I think we've, looking at my clock, I think we're spot on. Can I thank you very much? I hope it's been useful. I know it's recorded, so if you want to go back on anything, it's there. And if there's any questions, you can send me an email. I know you've got the email. So happy to help. And I look forward to seeing you sometime in reality. That's important. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So
Okay.
one more thing. Yeah, we will share a copy of John's presentation on the Hong Kong branch website in the next couple of weeks. So please check to see and this is when this is available. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.